the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. Who would like to second? Councillor Darby. Thank you. And we've got Ryan. Thanks, Ryan.
Hi everyone. I'm Ryan Bradley from the Policy and Plans Department. I'm just here to talk about the changes that are proposed to the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land. I've got a short PowerPoint presentation. There it is. So first of all, before we get into it, I'll just quickly go over where the areas of highly productive land are in Auckland, so we know what we're talking about. This map here shows in green the areas that are the most productive. So everywhere in the whole country, in fact, has been given a rating between 1 and 8, 1 being the best, 8 being the worst in terms of its versatility for farming. So the darker green areas are the areas of LUC 1, and the red areas are the LUC 8 areas. So you can see most of it's around Pukekohe and also West Auckland, and the rest of it's scattered throughout rural Auckland. So this is the same map, just taking away everything except for LUC 1, 2 and 3. And LUC 1, 2 and 3 are what is considered as highly productive land when we're talking about the National Policy Statement. This map here is just again looking at that area of Auckland that is LUC 1, 2 and 3, but it's just looking at what's happened over the last 25 or more years actually since the original survey was done about the 1970s or 1980s. When it was done, there was about 126,000 hectares of LUC 1 to 3 across Auckland. There's been urban expansion since that time, so areas like Albany and so on that have come in have taken about 13% of that out of play. There's also been the future urban zone that's come in, which is this yellow area on the map. That's taken another 5%. And then the countryside living zone, which is areas which are subdivided down to 1 or 2 hectares, it's another 7%. So since the 1970s or 80s, we've lost about 25% of our highly productive land, and obviously prior to that, a lot of it was already lost as well in areas that had already been urbanised by the time they came to survey it. So in terms of what we have to do under the National Policy Statement for Highly Productive Land, in terms of implementing it, we have been given 3 years to produce maps of where highly productive land is in Auckland. So the maps that you were just looking at before are kind of the transitional maps, just using LUC 1, 2 and 3, but it's up to the council to go out and actually decide where these broad geographic areas of highly productive land are, and we need to put a plan change out and put them into the unitary plan. We have not yet started that. It's probably going to start next year. And in the interim, there's a transitional definition of highly productive land, and that's in the unitary plan maps. If you go online, you can see exactly where we're showing that transitional definition. That's anything that's zoned rural that is on LUC 1, 2 or 3. So we need to do that plan change to put it in the maps. In the interim, we've got that transitional definition. That's really to stop the gold rush effect of people knowing that there is going to be some rule tightening coming up, and so they want to apply before that comes into play. So that's why that's there. And then once we've got the maps, and we've got another 3 years to change the text of the plan as well to make sure that that matches up with the National Policy Statement. Now, it came into effect in October last year. It already is affecting resource consents and plan changes. So any resource consents that have been lodged now need to have regard to the National Policy Statement, and any plan changes need to give effect to it. So it is actually already having an effect on those. So there's been a number of consents declined as well as plan changes declined because of the National Policy Statement. So in terms of the changes that they're proposing, I thought we'd just quickly go over the one section that they're proposing the changes to and show you what it says at the moment, and then we can see what the changes are. So the changes are to this bit around land use and development on highly productive land. So this part is not about subdivision, it's not about rezoning, it's just about land use activities. And so what it says is that you need to avoid inappropriate use or development on highly productive land. And avoid is a very strong word in planning in New Zealand, so that's basically directing you towards a no. And what it says is that the appropriate activities are land-based primary production, and then everything else is inappropriate and should be avoided unless it's on the list of exceptions. And that list of exceptions is there. I won't go through it in detail. That looks like it's a long list, but actually they're all quite specific, and it is hard if you had an activity to try to fit it into one of those exceptions unless it really is fits under it really neatly, which is unlikely. So the potential changes are to that section of the National Policy Statement around land use and the list of exceptions. So some of the stakeholders have raised some issues in terms of that list not being broad enough, wanting it to have more exceptions on it. The first one is around new infrastructure on highly productive land. So it already allows for existing infrastructure and maintenance of existing infrastructure expansion, but doesn't allow for new infrastructure. Now, it's important to note that most infrastructure is done by requiring authorities that can designate land, and so this change doesn't have that much of an effect on them. Really, what it's aimed at is private developers of infrastructure that don't have the power to designate land. And really, what it boils down to is this is aimed at solar farm operators. Solar farms have become quite popular in the last few years, and a lot of them want to locate in rural areas on flat land, which generally happens to also coincide with being highly productive land. So this is basically looking to allow for new infrastructure on highly productive land that really is a pathway for solar farms to be able to get consents to locate on highly productive land. The second change they want to make is to that list is to add another exception. This is for indoor primary production and hydroponic greenhouses. So those are activities that aren't land-based primary activities, so they don't rely on the soil of the site. So when we're talking about intensive farms, we're talking about piggeries, poultry farms and so on. And most greenhouses that are built these days don't actually rely on the soil of the site. They've got some other artificial growing media. So these don't actually have a route through that because they're not land-based primary production. They don't appear on that list of exceptions. There's no easy consenting route for those to get through. And so the feedback from growers is that these activities need to be on this highly productive land because they want to be close to the other supporting activities that help them, such as pack houses and so on. So basically the Ministry for the Environment is seeking feedback on these changes, and the idea is that the Council would put in a submission. This agenda item doesn't have a draft submission, but we're looking to have some members delegated to sign off a submission, and it will be due by the end of the month. So happy to answer any questions on that. There's a bit more detail in the report around it, but I've just kind of covered it at a high level.
Thank you, Ryan. I've got 4 questions so far. Councillor Sayers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just 2, Ryan. Thanks, mate. That was a very good presentation, very concise. So the Rural Advisory Panel, have they given any opinion on this?
Yes. So we've been to the Rural Advisory Panel, sought some feedback. That's not included in the report because we didn't have it in time. But yes, we've got feedback from the Rural Advisory Panel, as well as we went out to all local boards, and in particular we went out to the Franklin, Rodney and Waiheke local boards, being the main rural boards, to get the feedback, and each of those will be providing feedback as well.
Okay. And will the Rural Advisory Panel provide feedback as well?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
okay. All right, and the other question, so I'm not really in favour of adding in these new ones like the piggeries, poultry, solar farms, and for them to have easy access to it. I don't think it locks up. Once the concrete's down, the concrete pad's down, in my mind, Ryan, it's down. And you can't use the land. Who's going to dig it up? In the future. So, if I voted for this, are we just voting for approval for a submission, or is there a way that I can indicate if I vote against this? If I vote for it, I don't want to be voting to include those options in there. So I'm just reading your resolution that's been put forward with the Chair's resolution. I can't see where the option there is, Angela, for me to say that I protest against those ones going in.
Yeah, my understanding is that we're just voting on a delegation here. We're not voting on the actual content of the submission. But I think there is recommendation C as well that does talk about the members of the committee will have the opportunity to provide input into the draft submission prior to its approval.
Yeah.
So through the chair, just to clarify, just because again the timeframes, we are asking for a delegation, so we're not asking you to approve a particular viewpoint on these matters, but we are saying that there'll be a delegation, and you'll see some red in addition there. We'll delegate to approve that ultimately, but we will draft that up and put it out so you can have your direct feedback before the delegated group make their decision. So we're not asking for your views about the positions on those activities today.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Look, I'm wrestling a bit with this because I agree we should put a submission in, but I don't know what our submission is going to say. And I would kind of like to know what our submission has to say. So my question is in two forms. I want to know, I know that you said you've spoken to the Rural Advisory Panel, but I haven't seen that feedback. And just to your very point, I'd like to, if we're putting a submission in something, I want to know what it says. So my questions are twofold. One, could we either go back to the Ministry of whatever it is, Ministry for Environment, and ask for a 3-day approval, noting that your next committee is the 2nd of November, so we could actually put it through that committee? Or could we bring the final submission to the governing body, which is the Thursday before, and at least see it and vote on it? Because respectfully, I think there might be a few interesting views around the table once we see what the submission is. So whilst I don't, I'm not unhappy with what we're doing, I just feel that as a governor, I want to know what we are actually saying. And I want to know how, and just because you send me something by email and I respond, I have no idea necessarily what everybody else, and then is there a vote around that, or is there just some discussion? So I think the process is just missing a step here, and two options.
So through the chair, of course, normally we would bring it exactly back to the committees, as you said. It was just the timeframes. If through the chair, the committee did want to make a decision on this like you would normally, in inverted commas, then I think either of those options would work. I suspect as staff we might appreciate the additional week if we asked for an extension to MFE to the 2nd of November as opposed to the GB on the 26th. But look, I'm in your hands. We can do that if that's the preference.
If it's okay, could you add a D then and see if we can do that? Because I think that's key for me. You know, it's the normal process for us, Madam Chair.
We can do that.
So we'll just work on this, but we'd effectively be removing B yeah, that's fine.
I still think the delegation is to write the proposal. I'm not unhappy about that, but once it's written, I want to know what it says. So I could be, by delegating to these people, I could be making sure that the council submission goes to something completely contrary and have your concrete pads or whatever you don't want in it, and you won't have a say.
Yep, so
Yeah, we'll work on some words. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
I've got a few comments. First off, the issue of highly productive land, and I raised this issue consistently during the unitary plan. What we've got around Pukekohe are a unique set of circumstances. So yes, you've got highly productive soils, they are elite soils, but they're also in a frost-free area that enables you to bring on crops earlier. They also have water, which is vital for most forms of agriculture, and in particular horticulture. They've got proximity to markets and transport routes. There is no other area in New Zealand that has what Pukekohe has. So it's not just highly productive. There's a set of circumstances that need to be explicit. The other context is the historical context around what's happened to our highly productive land. So the Rosebank Peninsula, which was a phenomenal area and had all of those characteristics, or a number of them, that's gone. It's been covered over with factories. Up in Rodney, you've got the, what's the name of it, Omaha Flats, Point Wells. Yeah, that context, well, the question that's been addressed to us and the question that is in the agenda item is for a response and some information. So that's what I'm generating, okay? So the contextual situation needs to be put in there. Then the loss of elite soils through erosion and the like that is occurring across New Zealand also needs to be figured in. All of these things are entirely relevant. Energy. We don't have an energy strategy in New Zealand. We don't have an energy strategy in Auckland. We should have some context around what's happening around solar farms and wind and so on in Auckland, which presently we don't even have. So that is also an issue to raise. And certainly the precedent that would be set from just plastering areas of elite soils and the like with concrete and the like is just horrific. And I would further say, look at the context of what other cities do in this space, and many of them, and I'm thinking about cities in Europe that have a long history, are incredibly methodical around issues like this. In Norway, for example, if you want to do something on a bit of land, they've got the records probably going back 300, 400, 500, 600 years on all the crops that were growing on that land and the returns. So they've got a strong historical context around valuing their land. What work are we doing around this? So there's some suggestions that go to the question that's asked in the agenda item. Thank you.
Thanks, councillor. And I saw Ryan writing all of those points down. Thank you. Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you. I just have sort of three questions. One, the first is there's a number of exceptions that MFE have identified to this, and one of them, just if you can confirm for my understanding, one of those is Māori land. Yep. Okay, thank you. Second question is, where do cumulative effects sit in the weighting of these sorts of decisions? So I'm mindful it takes 500 plus years for every inch of topsoil. So if you get it wrong, you're waiting a long time before you can grow anything in these areas. So I totally understand the practicalities of what's been asked here, but it's just around I guess that we're talking about a cumulative issue here. So it's a finite resource that shrinks, potentially chicken farm by chicken farm. I'm not trying to put a disaster scenario out there, but I'm just wanting to understand from the officer's point of view the thinking around that, and that would form into the submission. And the last point is around, in addition to kind of emailing iwi, what other proactive steps have been done to reflect iwi feedback? I guess in the past, so I'm thinking of iwi management plans that already are out there. I'm thinking of evidence given to plan change hearings from the likes of Ngāti Tamaoho. You know, so rather than just a kind of blanket email, council should already have fairly good record of the sentiments of some of the rural iwi on the topic of elite soils. So that's probably another question. Is that part of your thinking, or if not, can it please be part of your thinking? So thank you. Oh, and sorry, the very last point. And sorry, this isn't a question, it's just a kind of comment. If the decision goes to the governing body, that excludes the IMSB from having a voice on a matter that's of significance to Māori, which is the productivity of soils. It's an environmental issue. So, kia ora.
Yep, so in terms of the questions, yes, there is an exception for Māori land in that list, and it doesn't have any caveats with it. It's just if it qualifies, it's an exception, so it doesn't limit what can be done on that land. In terms of cumulative effects, those aren't really taken into account under this, so you're right that it could be, you know, chicken farm by chicken farm, it could be a lot. And so that's one of the things we need to understand before we put in our submission is how many chicken farms are there currently, how many are on the horizon, that sort of thing, as well as piggeries and glass houses and so on. So that's information that we need to gather for a possible submission. And yes, looking at past iwi management plans and evidence of plan change and so on, it's a great idea in terms of trying to get some feedback from iwi. I have had some feedback already from some iwi, but unlikely probably to get all of them feeding back. I guess I probably want to go back to the iwi before I put in those views, because they might have changed, because I can think of one example was plan change 73 in Waiuku, where the iwi were quite supportive of that plan change going on to highly productive land. So I'm not sure if that actually is their view on a whole, or if that was just specifically to that site and so on. So that's something probably, before we put some things in, we'd have to go back and check with the iwi. And yeah, the fourth point was just about the governing body and the IMSB. And that's something for this panel to talk about.
And before I go to Councillor Darby, I just want to check with Councillor Baker and Darby on the changes to the recommendations. What I've just spoken to Megan about is a pathway to get your feedback in, and Councillor Sayers and others to Ryan. Thank you. Councillor Darby?
Yeah, interesting viewpoints from the members. Councillor Sayers, I was quite impressed with your response there, so thank you. You know, we've got quite a strong history in leading this work, actually. It was the former committee, we prompted the, he's the current minister actually, Minister Parker, to get cracking with this work. In fact, I think we had to write to him a couple of times, and it was very late coming, but it came out. Now there is a relook, but it's in two narrow areas. It's not the whole lot again. So I'm just taking this opportunity to give some feedback, because I think this is what Ryan's looking for, aren't you? So I think one of the things I always remind myself is that soil at a minimum takes around about 10,000 years to make, you know, through natural processes. And an excavator or a digger can take a swipe at it or a cut at it in about 30 seconds, and it's gone forever, because it's not the same soil. It's just not. And anybody in the growing business knows that natural soils are like gold, and high quality soils are like lithium gold. So I guess I'm concerned about our possible response here. One is, I don't think this is just a rural response. I think the rural sector might have an interest. They are the hosts of this great soil, but the urban sector are the consumers of the food that comes from these great soils, be they 1, 2s or 3s. So I think we need to balance this up and make sure that we hear the urban view and the rural view. That's the first point that I would make. I have grave concerns about grade 1, 2, 3 soils being colonised by infrastructure that is cool for today, and it's really important infrastructure like voltaics, solar arrays, wind farms. There might be others, and yes, we need them for very important outcomes to address climate, but we have to be very careful. We just don't give them a pathway into creating another climate problem, which is sustaining the people of this nation and our city by growing food in real soils. So I've got a real concern about that infrastructure relaxation, and I've got a real concern about any possible relaxation on intensive farming where you lay a slab down or multiple slabs, be it poultry farm, piggery, rotary, dairy, and the list goes on. I'm sure there's a lot of other things. So I am interested in seeing the draft, and I think Ryan is looking for a bit of a steer as to how that draft might be written up at the moment, but I am of the view that we should be protectionists of these great soils and not allow easy inroads to destroy them. They're destroyed forever, and boy, have we destroyed the food producing soils around Tamaki Makaurau in a shocking way. So if you treat this like an absolute treasure that it is, because there's so little of it, I think we should be on the very conservative side in our response. Sorry, I needed to give my
Thank you.
feedback
No,
there.
that's okay, and I'll take it as a comment. Christina Darby. Mayor Brown.
Thank you for that. I do have a question, believe it or not, or two or three, but I'm with the very conservative view here. You know, I don't think we can afford to lose any more. It annoys me to see houses on bloody land where you can grow kumaras. What about already zoned land, future urban? Is some of this already highly productive land, 1, 2, 3, is already zoned as future urban? How do we stop that becoming another bloody subdivision?
So the national policy statement only allows rural zoned land to be considered as highly productive land. So even if it's got LUC 1, 2 or 3, if the zone over top of it is urban or future urban or countryside living, it can't be considered highly productive land under that national policy statement. So the only way we could do that would be to rezone future urban land back to rural.
Any thoughts about doing that?
I think that's what you might be talking about next meeting at the future development strategy.
So the future development strategy could hold a key to that, and that's obviously been delayed through to whenever, next meeting. So there could be opportunity there. I think it's a good point though, so we will just do a little bit of work on understanding that amount, just so that you can understand it when you put your submission in, but it may mean some additional decisions or work more specifically if you've got concerns about the amount of future urban in this area.
Okay, we'll try not to be too influenced by Fletchers there, those people who get rung them. Doesn't waste the time with me. What is it possible, because I'm a great supporter of keeping as much of this land as we can. There is another place in New Zealand where your veggies are all going to come from if we don't do that, and it's called Kaitaia. But they won't be quite so cheap or fresh. Is there any thought of rating relief on such land such as this? Because our rating policies kind of drive the guys to subdivide. And if we rate them at a level which is pretty bloody high compared to what they're earning out of this, then it becomes really kind of, you can't blame the guy for thinking, oh, bloody hell, I'll give Fletchers a ring. Not a good thing. And so I've often found that if you don't understand the commercial drivers, it's very hard to change things with regulation. Like I'm trying to change the behaviour on orange cones at the moment. When I asked AT how they paid, no one at AT knew whether they're paid by cone or by metre or by day or by truck or anything. So one of the commercial drivers, and I'm speaking this as a subdivider who generally avoids good land, sometimes the rating policies drive you towards something which is not good for everybody. So can we put some thought into that? Is that a possibility?
Can I take that as a kind of request? I can't answer your question, but let us have a look at that. Thanks.
That'll do. That's a start. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Walker, question?
Yeah, again, just a few other rapid comments to add to the mix that make this area unique that I should have remembered. Access to labour and varying types of labour, which is critical. The food security issue that Councillor Darby mentioned, incredibly important. We've had any number of submissions to us on that. The other thing is that around Pukekohe, you've got a whole ecosystem. So you've got the stuff that happens on the land, you've got the pack houses, you've got employment, and you've got towns and the like that have grown up around that. And what follows from that are the social issues. So I can tell you those solar farms, they employ 0 people once they are built. That's it. So you're talking about annihilating communities. So what does that do? What does that do to schools? What does it do to a place like Pukekohe and so on? So they are other issues that we should be factoring in. Thanks.
Yes, Councillor. Take that as a comment too. And Councillor Baker.
I've got a comment too, but it's really healthy and good and heartwarming to hear people concerned about Pukekohe and the soils. But I do urge a little bit of caution here. in regards to it's not only man-made infrastructure that ruins our soil, it is the soil itself. And so there's actually a lot of soil in Pukekohe that has a thing called white rot, which means it's impossible to grow in that soil anymore. And so whilst it's really easy to come in and just say we need to be really conservative and we need to be this and this and this, we actually need to understand the science behind that and some of the things that drive the feelings of some of the growers down there who are the people that cherish and worship that soil the most. And so I just urge that when we do have a look at this, that we're not just coming at it from we're not ill-informed, but are not 100% informed view on it, and that we're not cutting our nose off to spite our face. And so just let's have a look, because I've seen the Rural Advisory Panel feedback, and it might surprise some of you, and it will get out to you. As I say, it didn't make this because it didn't make the time slot, but this is from the industry who understand this better than anyone sitting around this table will ever understand it. So, and who have a vested interest in being able to use the soils and things as best they can. So let's inform ourselves before we rattle in with our very much appreciated, but sometimes often.
Thanks, Andy. So will you get those notes out to us? Sorry? Will you get those notes out to us? Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
Oh, it's a comment, Chair. Should we come back to it, or do you want me to do it
No,
now?
I think we're in comments and we just will.
Oh, thank you, Chair. That's very kind. Thank you. Yeah. Thanks, Toe. Look, just a couple of quick points. I just want to acknowledge, particularly Councillor Darby, both for his kōrero on this, but also I remember last term we voted together on a lot of this stuff in terms of elite soils and their protection. And so, I just want to acknowledge your record on this, Councillor Darby, as well. So thank you for that. It won't surprise you to think that, I think we need to be absolutist about this, right? If we touch a single blade of grass of soils that we desperately need, then we're moving into a climate-impacted future where our kids are going to be impoverished and in a hungry place. This is the backbone of our economy as a city and as actually a country. It's nationally significant. We're going to obviously need solar farms and places to put them as well, right? But we need these soils 100% of the time. So whenever we talk about this stuff, and I'm always banging on about compact city approaches and building housing close to jobs, and I've made the same speech 100 times in this place. Well, this is part of the picture, right? Is that I'm really concerned about our use of soils and the farmlands that are so important. It's going to give us the jobs that we need. It's going to give us the food that we need, and it's going to allow us to trade with our international partners. So let's be really absolutist and really strong on this. I really support B. I can't wait for it to all come back and have a bit of a proper kōrero about it. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Philippina, can you phrase your question as a comment?
Yeah, no, I was only thinking about our staff member still there, Chair. That's why I wanted the part-time first. I won't be making any comments, but only because our staff member's still here. So that's why. So look, I'll ask the question, and well, no, I won't ask it of you, but I'm assuming that he's free to go.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Brian. He was writing
I've actually got
notes.
the next item as well, so I'll stay around.
Yeah, no, I just with our standing orders, that's all. Sorry. So
taking
Chair,
good notes.
it is a question, but it's a question of clarification to Megan. Megan, in regards to B, because for me, I'm into the process. So with B, I'm assuming that you are confident in regards to getting that extension.
Yeah, look, yes, I am. No, I haven't asked for it, and clearly it's not my decision. So, saying that, I am sure that I will be able to get that extension because I will just go to wherever I need to get to get it. So it's fine.
So subsequent, is that, what if you don't? What process will we then have in place? Yeah. So then we don't have to come back to here to say, sorry, I didn't get the extension. We have to have an extraordinary meeting. So what process, or what can we put in this recommendation so we know the process is very clear? One, we're asking for the extension. Hopefully we get it. but I want to make sure and cover that if we don't, in the event it doesn't happen, that's all. Kilda.
So my, so no, look, you're quite right. I heard Member Ashby's comment though around the governing body as another option, of course, because that doesn't require an extension, and that of course is open to you. But Member Ashby's comment is very relevant to that. The worst thing is that we would be, I don't know, 3 days late in putting up. So if we didn't get an extension, it was due on the 30th or 31st, whatever date it was, we'd be 3 days late. And if MFE can't deal with that, well, there's some bigger issues, you know? So, I think it'll be fine.
She'll be right. She'll be right. Thank you. Last speaker is Councillor Sayers.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciated my comments, the comments of Councillor Baker around this white rot and type of stuff like that, but I understand from Auckland Council's planning staff that they can actually isolate any of those areas that may currently be within the maps of the highly productive areas and isolate them out so they don't actually fall within the definition of highly productive land. So I guess my comment, Madam Chair, would be that, once highly productive land has concrete pads on it, it's effectively lost forever. And regardless if it happens to be a solar farm, a poultry farm, a glass house or piggery, those soils are lost for growing purposes. So I would, my feedback through you is that it's vital that the Auckland Council submission ensures that those lands, those highly productive lands, are not built upon with further concrete pads. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Okay, that's everybody. So we'll...
Just got a question. Sorry.
Sure.
And can I just pass it to Ryan? There's the question of white rot's been raised. We're talking about 10,000-year-old soils. White rot lasts for 20 or 30 years, apparently. Can we just double check the science? If there is part of our organisation or a submission coming in saying, oh no, white rot soils, that can be concreted over, it needs to be questioned, but it needs to be a scientific response. It can't be just anecdotal, please.
Through the chair, I hear that. Thank you. Sorry, Mayor, did you want to make a comment?
Yeah, Kerikeri dealt with this issue some time ago. Phytophthora is in quite a lot of soils up there, which does prevent certain growth, but not a growth of all horticultural products. And so there is, it doesn't rule it out. It means that it rules out some products there. And in the 25 years since this has become an issue, the treatments have arrived so that some of the ones that couldn't grow in Phytophthora soils can. And so it's something to be thought about, but the solution isn't to cover it in houses. The solution is to consider alternative products.
What I'd like to do, Councillor Darby, is to find a pathway between you and the other councillors and Ryan, so we can get all of that nutted out in the submission. I'd like to put this to the vote. All in favour? Aye. Against? Okay. Thank you. Ryan, would you like to come back?